Welcome to the third unit of first section of physiology paper, that is brain and spinal cord, or we can call it as a central nervous system. So we are going to see about central nervous system in this class or in this section. When we talk about brain, then we should not forget about these three scientists: Gamaliel Golgi, Santiago Ramon Cajal, and Auguste Forel. The Cajal and Golgi obtained Nobel Award for their important inventions about the neurons. And Forel, he's played a vital role by studying the nerve impulse conductions. He is otherwise called as His. So these three scientists plays a vital role for the development of nervous system. When you talk about nervous system, the nervous systems are broadly classified into two categories. One is known as the central nervous system, the other one is known as the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system means the system which is comprised of brain and spinal cord. The system which is moving away from these two components are called as a peripheral nervous system, which is present outside the main nervous system. That's why they are called as a peripheral nervous system, PNS, and central nervous system usually called as a CNS. The PNS again are of two types: afferent division, efferent division. Afferent division means the component which is going to supply the information to the central nervous system. They are known as the afferent divisions: somatic sensory, visceral sensory, and special sensory. So these three components are considered to be as afferent divisions. When you come to efferent means the information which is going to flow from the brain or central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. That is known as the effector function. So that is carried out by somatic motor neuron and autonomic motor neuron. This autonomic motor neuron is actually contains sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous system. So this is what the overall classification of a nervous system. So nervous system can be classified into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is of two types, mainly brain and spinal cord comprised of central nervous system. When you go to peripheral nervous system, again it is divided into two: afferent, efferent. Afferent are of three types, efferent are of two types, and in efferent, again the autonomic motor system is again divided into three types: sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric. So if we cover all these topics, then we will finish about the nervous system. So in this section we are going to see about only central nervous system, which is comprised of brain and spinal cord. So when you talk about central nervous system, it is going to have brain and spinal cord. So first we will see about brain. So the brain is actually developed from the neural tube during the development. It is going to be the anterior part of the neural tube which is developed as a brain. And you can say there are about three important parts of brain: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Okay, then the forebrain comprised of cerebrum and diencephalon. Midbrain remains as a single unit, whereas hindbrain again consists of pons, medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum. So this is the composition of brain. Then the brain is continued as a stem, that is known as a brain stem. Okay, then the brain also contains four interconnected cavities are present inside the brain. That cavities are known as cerebral ventricles. They are usually filled with cerebrospinal fluid, which is used to provide support to the brain. Okay, so this is about the structure of brain. Now you can see the image of the brain. So the brain, when it is present in the neural tube form, it has forebrain part, midbrain part, hindbrain part. When it is developed, you can see this cerebrum and diencephalon, they contribute forebrain, and midbrain present as such, and then the hindbrain, which is made up of pons, medulla oblongata, so they are all cerebellum, so they are all contributes the hindbrain. Okay, then the brain continued as a spinal cord, and midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata collectively called as brainstem. And then the cerebrum, which is going to be made up of four lobes. One is known as frontal lobe, another one is known as a parietal lobe, occipital lobe and temporal lobe. So there are 4 lobes are present in the cerebrum. So the cerebrum is going to made up of 4 lobes. Then when you look into the structure of cerebrum, the cerebrum is going to have different components like corpus callosum. You can see a great divisions below this cerebrum, that is known as a corpus callosum. Then the initial part of this corpus callosum is known as genu of corpus callosum. Then the below part of this corpus callosum is known as septum pellucidum. The initial part, anterior part, is known as anterior commissure. And then hypothalamus is present below this corpus callosum. Then optic chiasma, which is going to link to the eye. Then infundibulum is present, which connects the pituitary gland. Then mammillary body is present. Then in the posterior part, you have an intermediate mass, choroid plexus of third ventricles, and then splenium of corpus callosum. The end region of corpus callosum is known as splenium of corpus callosum. Then below that you will have a pineal body. Then corpora quadrigemina is also going to continue, and it is as from the pineal body. Then cortex of cerebellum. Cerebellum is present. Then the pons is continued from the hypothalamus regions. And then you will have a medulla oblongata. Okay, so the medulla oblongata, pons, and then the midbrain. So they will form the brain stem. Okay, the cerebellum and hypothalamus, they all contribute the hindbrain. The cerebrum and diencephalon, they contribute about the forebrain. Okay, then the brain will have ups and downs, gyri and sulcus. So this image is the original anatomical structure of the brain. If you cut a brain of an individual, the brain look like this. So this is the anatomical image of the original brain. You can see. So by this brain structure only we are able to get those images. So you can see this, the original image of a normal human brain. Then when you talk about a brain, central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, if you take a brain, brain is going to contain the forebrain, hindbrain, then midbrain part. In that brain we have some ventricles, cavities. That ventricles are structures that produce this cerebrospinal fluid and it transport it around the cranial cavity. They are all lined by ependymal cells. Ependymal cells are present in that particular cavities. So they are also present in the choroid plexus. There are about 4 ventricles are present. One is right and left lateral ventricles. So 2 ventricles, right and lateral, right and left lateral ventricles, 2 ventricles. Then third ventricle and fourth ventricle. So there are about 4 cavities, 4 ventricles you can able to identify within the brain. The left and right lateral ventricles are located within their respective hemisphere. 2 hemisphere is there, So according to that 2 hemisphere, you have left and right, 2 lateral ventricles are present. They have a horns like projections through these lobes, like frontal temporal lobes. The volume of the lateral ventricles increases with size. You can see that this is what that 2 ventricles, lateral ventricles, you can see this. This is what they will present and throughout the different lobes. Lateral, right and left, 2 ventricles. Then in between these 2 you have another ventricle which is known as the third ventricle. Then bottom of the third ventricle you have about the fourth ventricle, which is going to present in the pons and that region. It is continued at the bottom of the brain. Okay, so the lateral ventricles will present throughout the hemisphere. That is known as a lateral ventricle. Okay, so the ventricle locations can be seen in different positions. See now, you can see the side view of that ventricles. You can see lateral ventricle is present. Okay, so this is what the third ventricle, choroid plexus of third ventricle is present. So this is known as the lateral ventricle. This is known as the third ventricle, and you can also see the fourth ventricle. It is continued here. Could you able to see it? This is what first ventricle, and this is second, that is third. Lateral 2 ventricles are present, 2 sides, this side and this side. You can see the lateral ventricles. They are moving throughout the cerebrum. Then third ventricle. Then fourth ventricle. So the side view here you can see. So this ventricle is going to produce all these cerebrospinal fluid, which is going to present throughout the brain and spinal cord, which is going to helpful for their survival, maintenance. Okay. So they are usually placed between this pia mater, arachnoid mater and dura mater. You can see this, the layerings which protects this brain. Pia mater and arachnoid mater and then dura mater. They are called as meninges. So within this meninges we have this type of cerebrospinal fluid. You can see this. This cerebrospinal fluid is actually produced from these ventricles. Okay, so the ventricles are produces this cerebrospinal fluid, and this cerebrospinal fluid is going to helpful for the maintaining the shape and positions of the brain. Okay, then this is another cross section of the brain. Here also you can see the presence of lateral ventricles, third ventricle and fourth ventricles. Okay, so this is how you can see the ventricles of the brain by means of this cross section. This is the only view of the ventricles. Okay, so the lateral ventricles are connected to third ventricle by the foramen of Monro. Third ventricle situation is between the right and left thalamus, because thalamus is present in two hemispheres. So between that you have a third ventricle. The anterior surface of the ventricle contains two protrusions, supraoptic recess located above the optic chiasma and infundibular recess that is located above the optic stalk. The fourth ventricle is the last in the system. It receives cerebrospinal fluid from the third ventricle via the cerebral aqueduct, the duct which connects. Now the third and fourth ventricle is known as the cerebral aqueduct. It lies within the brainstem. You can see the fourth ventricle is present along with the brainstem at the junction between pons and medulla oblongata. From the fourth ventricle, the fluid drains into two places. One is known as the central spinal canal. So it is going to continue in the spinal cord. The other one is known as the subarachnoid cisternae, which bathes the brain between arachnoid and the pia mater. Okay, here the cerebrospinal fluid is reabsorbed back into circulation. That is, they will circulate from one place to other place. They are interconnected. That is why they are called as cavities. Cavities of the brain. Ventricles are cavities of the brains. Through these cavities, cerebrospinal fluid, they are maintaining the shape of the brain. That is functioning. Shape means what? It has to be present in a particular positions, balancing. If there is something happens to this movement of the cerebrospinal fluid and production of the cerebrospinal fluid, then there is a defect occurs in the balance of the brain. We are unable to move in a upright positions. Okay, so that will affect, even damage the brain if the cerebrospinal fluid is not present. Okay, so that is how the importance of ventricles. Next is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is going to contain gray matter and white matter. Okay, the outer cell is going to be usually in gray color, so they are known as the gray matter. The interior part is usually contains myelin sheath. That's why they are called as white matter. Okay, so then the cortex layers of the left and right cerebral hemispheres are largely separated by a deep longitudinal division. They are connected by a massive bundle of nerve fiber known as corpus callosum. So the corpus callosum is going to collect all the connections. It's like a connection component. All the nerve fibers are connected to this corpus callosum. The cerebral cortex of each cerebral hemisphere is divided into four lobes, that is frontal, parietal, occipital and temporal lobe. Each will have its own functions. And then we have some ups and downs. The downs are usually called as grooves. The grooves are usually called as sulci, and the up ridges are usually called as gyri. So the ridges are gyri and the grooves are sulci, in plural sulci and gyri, in singular gyrus and sulcis. Okay, so the whole brain seems to be like it is folded. The folded nature of the brain, what is the advantage of this? So due to the presence of many folds, we can able to place a large amount of nerve cells in a smaller region. That is what the advantage of these type of folding, gyrus and sulci. And then some of the forebrain areas consist of both gray and white matter. They are classified together in a functional system called limbic system. So the outer region usually contains a gray matter, inner region usually contains a white matter. In some region will contain both white and gray matter. They are known as the limbic system. Then when you come down, the basal nuclei are masses of gray matter composed of neuron cell bodies located deep within the white matter of the cerebrum. So the gray matter which is present within the deeper region of the cerebrum is known as the basal nuclei. These basal nuclei can be divided into different ways. You can see here, it is called as the basal nuclei. There are two regions. So these whole part from two different hemispheres, these parts are usually called as a basal nuclei. You can see the basal nuclei are of corpus striatum, one part, claustrum, one part. The claustrum is a very thin region, whereas this corpus striatum is a thick region. Of this, again two parts. One is known as the caudate nucleus, which is present in the forebrain part, that is in the anterior part. Then the lentiform nucleus, which is present in the sideways. This lentiform nucleus are of again two types. One is known as putamen, which is present in the above region, and globus pallidus, which is present in the below region, which is very close to thalamus. Next, after this basal nuclei, you have the thalamus presence. These are all present in the cerebrum. It is also a cross section of the brain. The diencephalon, which is divided into two by a narrow third cerebral ventricles. The cerebral third ventricle is actually divides the diencephalon into a two component. The diencephalon usually contains thalamus, hypothalamus and epithalamus, three regions. If you see the brain, after the presence of this, the presence of these ventricles, you can see this third ventricle, which is going to divide this thalamus into different regions. You can see it in the diagram. Here you will have a thalamus, So below this thalamus you have hypothalamus. Then the below region is known as the epithalamus. So these three components. So this component is present in one side of the hemisphere. The other one is the other side of the hemisphere. The ventricle, which is cavity, which is going to pass through this region, will divide these two hemisphere into two. That's why you have about two different sections of this particular thalamus. So three regions we have: thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus. So the thalamus is a collection of several large nuclei that serve as a synaptic relay station and integrating centers for most inputs to the cortex. That it has a key function in general arousal. Thalamus is also involved in focusing attention. So to focus on attention, you need this particular thalamus region to function very good. To identify an individual in a larger gathering, so it is useful. Then hypothalamus, which is present below the thalamus, it contains numerous nucleus. They plays a vital role. Master command. It is the part of master command center for all the coordinations. It is the single most important part of brain, which is going to carry out the homeostatic regulation of the internal environment. Even the eating, drinking, they are all controlled by these particular regions. Okay, the hypothalamus lies directly above, is connected by the stalk to the pituitary gland. Is connected by the stalk to the pituitary gland, which is again responsible for the growth. The epithalamus is a small mass of tissue that includes pineal gland. The epithalamus region is going to contain the pineal gland, which participate in the control of circadian rhythm, diurnal variations, day-night variations, by producing this hormone of melatonin. So epithalamus is pineal gland related component. Hypothalamus is a master center. Thalamus is responsible for concentrating, focusing a particular point. Then this completes the forebrain. Brain, that is cerebrum and diencephalon, is known as forebrain. Next is the hindbrain. The hindbrain is going to be made up of with this cerebellum, important part it is going to place, and it is also going to contain many cells, and it displays a vital role for the voluntary movement. It is an important center for coordinating movement and controlling posture and balance. See, the alcohol patients unable to stand in a proper place, in a proper position. Why? Because the problem in the cerebellum. When you take alcohol, it prevents the role of, it malfunctions the role of cerebellum, so that we are unable to stand balanced positions. We can't able to sit properly. We can't able to stand properly. So the other component of this hindbrain is going to be a pons and medulla oblongata. They are also going to function along with that midbrain. So the midbrain, pons and the medulla oblongata are collectively known as the brainstem. All the nerve fibers that relay signals between forebrain, cerebellum and spinal cord pass through this brainstem. So the brainstem is going to carry out the nerve fibers from the forebrain, cerebellum to the spinal cord. Okay, so running through the core of the brainstem and consisting of loosely arranged nuclei intermingled with bundles of axons is the reticular formation. The one part of brain absolutely essential for the life. So that is what the brainstem is very important. If there is any damage occurs to the brainstem, then the patient is said to be in coma. If you cut the brainstem, then it leads to the malfunctioning of the throughout all the body, because this is going to be involved in the motor functions of cardiovascular, respiratory, and then muscular controls, focus, whatever it is. All the functions are relayed, communicated, conducted, controlled, regulated through this brainstem. So all the like a wires, So if you are connecting a wires to the house through a main box, okay. So this is considered to be as like the wire from the outer line, that is from the pole to the house. So if you cut the wire there, that nothing will current comes to the house. So like that, the brainstem plays a vital role, where you are relaying all the nerves from the brain, especially from the midbrain, or say about the hindbrain, or about the forebrain, cerebrum, hypothalamus, thalamus. They are all going to be interconnected through these nerve fibers, which is going through this brainstem. Then after this brainstem, the nerves continued in the form of spinal cord. Actually, the spinal cord is nothing but the soft tissue, which is going to present in the center region of the spinal cord bone. The spinal cord is made up of a bone. Within that bone, we have a central butterfly-shaped area of gray matter. That gray matter is actually going to form the important part of the spinal cord. So the spinal cord have two horns. One is known as a dorsal horns, which is usually present back of the body, and those horn which is present in the interior part is known as the ventral horn. A short distance from the cord, from the spinal cord, the dorsal and ventral roots is going to same level combine to form a spinal nerve. The nerve which is going to come out of the spinal cord is known as the spinal nerve. It is going to connect different organelles and organs, tissues. Okay, so this is the structure of the spinal cord. You can see the gray matter, which is in the shape of butterfly. Okay, so this is going to have a dorsal horn, which is the outer region, and they will have a ventral horn, that is known as the inner region. The nerves comes out of this dorsal horn is known as the dorsal root, and ventral horn is known as the ventral root, and these two, dorsal and ventral, will combine to form a nerve fiber. So this type of spinal cord nerves present on both sides and different discs. We know these are the things which are known as the different discs. So then the spinal cords forms the spinal nerve, which comes out of the spinal cord for every disc. You can see that between two discs. Okay, so you will get a nerve fiber. So this diagram is also clearly indicates for the exam point of view. The spinal cord is going to contain a white matter outer region and grey matter inner region and central canal. The canal is going to filled with cerebrospinal fluid. And then the dorsal and ventral regions, no? So these region neurons are connected by interneuron, and then you have the neuron which is going to deliver information to the organs or tissues is known as a motor neuron, which comes out of this ventral root. The neuron which is going to comes out of this dorsal root is called as a sensory neuron, which is going to carry information from the organ to the nervous system. So it is known as a sensory neuron. The neuron which comes out of this ventral root is known as the dorsal neuron. Dorsal root is going to contain a sensory neuron. These two neurons are connected by a interneuron. And then sometime in the dorsal root we might have a ganglions. Okay, so this dorsal region is going to be the outer part. Okay, that is which is present in the back side of the body. Whereas the interior ventral root is are going to present inside part of our body. Again, this diagram clearly indicates like brain, even the spinal cord is also consist of this pariah matter, arachnoid matter and dura matter. It is continued from the brain. The layers will continue from the outer cover of the brain and continuously through this spinal cord, pia matter, arachnoid matter, dura matter. And these are also again contains cerebrospinal fluid within this. Okay, so subarachnoid space. The subarachnoid space is going to contain this cerebrospinal fluid, and epidural space is present, and then subdural space is also present. So these spaces are going to continue from the brain throughout this spinal cord. So this diagram is also indicates how the information passed to the organ and how the information received from the organ through this spinal cord, and then it is communicated to the brain. Then the function of the brain can be identified by different registering mechanism, which is known as electroencephalogram, EEG. Okay, so it is different from ECG, heart identification. This is actually the brain identification, which is known as this EEG. The synaptic potential produced at the cell bodies and dendrites of the cerebral cortex create electrical currents that can be measured by electrodes placed on the scalp. So this record of this electrical current is known as this electroencephalogram, EEG. We have different types of EEG. Alpha pattern, you have beta pattern, you have theta pattern, you have delta. So the alpha usually indicates the functioning of parietal and occipital lobes, and beta will represent the frontal lobe function, and theta represents temporal and occipital lobe function, whereas the delta wave explains about the cerebral cortex, how the cerebrum functions. Cortical region of the cerebrum functions is can be obtained from the delta. So you can see the different type of waves, you can get it from different regions. Then unlike this electroencephalogram, we have different recognition tomographic technique to identify the status of brain. They are called as magnetic resonance imaging, magnetoencephalogram, positron emission tomography, and then computerized tomography, CT scan. This is so famous for the people. If you want to know about the status of brain, they will simply say you should take a CT scan. But for all these things, the initial scan is electroencephalogram, then it gets advanced method. Now we have about the method of CT scan. Okay, so with these scans we can know the status of brain. Then function of brain. The function is the brain is the ultimate leader of the body, which controls all of the function. If you damage the brain, it's equivalent to damage a whole individual. The individual become motionless. Even you can't lift your eyelids without the role of muscles and brain. Okay, the brain will control the muscle function. The muscle will do the blinking of eyes. So that is how the brain plays a vital role. If you see the cerebrum, as I told, cerebral cortex, which is going to participate in important role in perception, generation of skilled movement, reasoning, learning, memory. Similarly, the subcortical nuclei, which is going to control the emotions of our body, and then interconnecting the neurons. These are all things happen in cerebrum. When you come to diencephalon, diencephalon is going to contain the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus. So the focusing is going to achieved by the thalamus. If you come to hypothalamus, it is going to control the drinking, eating behavior of an individual. Okay, so these are all emotions, body regulating body temperature, circadian rhythm. They are all controlled by this diencephalon. When you go to cerebellum, balancing, learning, it's all achieved in the case of cerebellum. If you come to brainstem, it is going to act as a relay component. It is going to communicating cable between brain and other parts of the body through spinal cord. Okay, so it contains a reticular formation and various integrating centers, including those for cardiovascular and respiratory activity. Contains nuclear for cranial nerves 3 to 12. So from the 3 cranial nerve to 12 cranial nerve, this brain stem is going to contain the nuclear part. That is going to have the somatic body of the nerve. Neurons are present in the brain stem. Okay, so these are the major functions of the brain. And we may surprise to see that even though the brain have two hemispheres, they are looking like similar, but they have different roles to play. Different hemispheres. I hope everybody knows the left part of our brain controls the right part of our body. So when the nerves comes below our neck, it gets crosses. So the left side is controlled by right hemisphere of the brain, and right side is controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. And if you see the brain, the regions, different region will have different roles. You can't say that same locations in both hemisphere is doing same role. You can see the calculation role is played by here. Similarly, if you are a right-handed person, your left brain will function more. If you are a right-handed person, your left brain will function more. If you are a left-handed person, right brain function more. So the functioning part will differ. Calculation is going to be placed here. Simple language and comprehension is achieved here. The spatial concepts is achieved here. The main language center is present here. So speech and writing is going to be contributed by here. So left and right brain is not going to have the same role at the same time. They have different role to place. Most of the region might have same role, but it is not 100% same. Even we have different hemispheres are having different roles. So with this, I conclude the first section of third unit of Human Physiology paper. If you have any question, you can contact me through phone or mail ID sivabio@gmail.com or 9865866168. I will reply through mail or phone. And the books like Genon's Medical Physiology or Wanda's Human Physiology, Fox Human Physiology are utilized for the preparation of these slides. So with this, I conclude the presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.